Okay, thank you very much and good morning. We're precisely on time, so I have my watch here to make sure that I don't go over half an hour. And I hope, in fact, to be able to complete the presentation a little bit quicker than that. So if there are any questions at the end. One point I would make in relation to my CV, you will see no reference there to science. I am not a scientist, I am not a water scientist. Some of you down there in the audience probably know more than I do about some of the details of Horizon 2020 that I'm going to explain to you. So if you ask me afterwards any questions that I am not able to answer, I will find out the information and pass it back to Noviwam. But it's just a point, because my main background, as is indicated in my short CV, is more on the policy formation side across both cohesion policy and research policy, but not specifically in the domain of water. And also this presentation is one that I borrowed from the colleagues working in the water unit in the Environment Directorate of DG Research. Just broad outline. Firstly, there'll be just 2 slides on EU water research in FP6 and FP7. The main section of the presentation will be in detail on Horizon 2020 in general, what we're going to do in Horizon 2020, and what the opportunities are in the domain of water. And finally, I would have to say, though, last but definitely not least, there will be reference to cohesion issues and smart specialisation. This little slide here is interesting. It covers both FP6 and FP7 water projects. You can see a significant sum across the 2 periods, 1.3 billion euros and 819 projects. So it's clear that water is a significant element of the environmental activity that we support under successive framework programs, and that will continue to be the case in Horizon 2020. This is an interesting one. It's FP7 water sectorial repartition. And as you would expect, environment there in orange at 38.5% is the main element. So therefore you go to environment calls under FP7. But look, there's hardly a domain of the current framework program where some activity doesn't exist that has been flagged as water related. Now, I can't control exactly how detailed the water relationship is, but certainly you can see in the ERC 4.6%, in social sciences and humanities a tiny amount, 0.7%, transport 2%, energy 6.1%. But I have to admit the bulk is, as you would expect, in old-fashioned calls for proposals in the domain of the environment itself. Lots of things going on in the European landscape for water, R&I, and as I said a moment ago, things you probably know a lot more about than I do. But just to pick up on a few things here. There's a European Innovation Partnership in the domain of water. There's a water joint programming initiative. I'll just say 1 or 2 little words about that. As you probably know, joint programming is an activity that we're promoting heavily so far under the 7th Framework Programme, and it will continue into Horizon 2020. And it's one of the activities where we're not normally providing the money or the bulk of the money, but we're trying to get the member states together themselves to say, well, look, what are we doing in this instance in the domain of water? Can we do it better? Can we coordinate our activities better? And that's what joint programming is about. And we have ERA nets as well. I won't go into too much detail on any of these things, but as you can see, there is a broad European landscape in the domain of water. Water research in Europe public investment, 130 million euros per year at community level, 370 million per year at national level, giving 500 million per year in Europe. And one of the key questions is that, is this coordinated? Can it be coordinated better? And certainly it does need to be. Challenges and answers. We have global challenges, as we know and as we will have seen, notably yesterday in some of the presentations. We also have European-wide challenges, European diversity, context, institutional, cultural, and simply physical and geographical. Sarah and I think she's down in the audience now, come from 2 northern European island nations with lots and lots and lots of water, whereas I come down here to the south of Spain. And I told my wife last night that the weather, we were the 21st of January, and by Brussels standards, you could just about have had a barbecue last night. You know, that's an extraordinary physical difference across Europe that we can't neglect. In European industry, we need to enhance competitiveness to maintain world leadership to create new jobs. And a fascinating presentation we had yesterday from our colleague on the idea of virtual water and the fact that we forget that when we buy an automobile or a hi-fi or a litre of beer, there's a major water involvement in its production. Answers, systemic integrated solutions. Yes, well, we can say those are nice buzzwords, but what does it mean? Particularly, research is not enough. Research is extremely important. I come from DG Research, so you would not expect me to say otherwise. But innovation activities are also important. Translating ideas, as one of the colleagues that made in the presentation yesterday, translating good research ideas into actual innovative activities that can appear in the market. Individual sectors and communities cannot cope alone. Pooling resources through effective partnering is what we're trying to do. Moving into Horizon 2020 now, and I'll speed up a little bit because I see I've taken 5 minutes already just to get slide number 8. Horizon 2020 is a core part of the Europe 2020 strategy. It relates back to the Innovation Union, but also to the Resource Efficient Europe flagship initiatives. It strengthens the European research area. And notably, in relation to money, we're looking for 80 billion euros for Horizon 2020 compared to approximately 50 billion euros at the moment. As I hinted in my short little presentation yesterday, the multi-annual financial framework still has not been decided. We hope it will be decided fairly soon, and we will see then if we get our 80 billion euros. But still, I am confident that whatever the final figure is, it will be a significant increase on the current FP7 programming period. So what's new? It's a single program, bringing together what's at present the 7th framework program, the competitiveness and innovation framework program, and the EU contribution to the European Institute for Innovation and Technology, the EIT. It focuses in particular on grand societal challenges, and this is particularly so in the case of water, and I'll come back to that. Simplified common rules, funding schemes, and access for all companies, universities, institutes in all countries and beyond. Simplification, a single set of simpler and more coherent participation rules, and we have done a huge amount of work in that domain, working with the member states and trying to identify areas where we can improve things. One funding rate for different beneficiaries and activities. This is extremely important in terms of simplification. Maximum of 100% of the total eligible cost, except in the case of those closer to the market where it's capped at 70%, and also replacing the variety of different possible rates that exist at the moment with a single flat rate of 20% for direct eligible costs. Simple evaluation criteria, well, they don't actually change very much because, as you know, they're excellence, impact, and implementation. New forms of funding aimed at innovation. Simpler rules for grants, broader acceptance of participants' accounting practices for direct costs. That's really very, very important, because at the moment, as those of you who've been involved in projects that have been audited will know, that the first thing the auditors start looking at is your own accounting practices and say, oh, well, I was in country X last week and it was done differently. So I think it's important for the Commission to accept that there are different member states, there are different accounting practices, and we need to live with that. Flat rates for indirect costs, that's something where we can make very, very good progress in accepting that we can simplify in terms of the rates we apply. No timesheets for personnel working full-time on a project. I'd hate to see if I had to fill in a timesheet, so I think that it's only fair that when you have people working full-time, they're not having to fill in timesheets. Targeted and better controlled audits. The 3 distinct and mutually reinforcing strategic priorities under Horizon 2020, excellent science, industrial leadership, societal challenges. I'll skip through these fairly quickly. What's highlighted in red there are those parts of Horizon 2020 where there is particular scope for the involvement of the water sector. You can see food security, energy, transport, climate action, resource efficiency and raw materials, but also leadership in enabling technologies. I'll come back to these in more detail. If you look at the structure of Horizon 2020 of the European Research Council, very, very significant funding. And as we saw in the little pie chart a few slides further back, the ERC has already been involved in the water sector, and we would expect that to continue. We have future and emerging technologies, Marie Curie actions, that's essentially in the replacing the old people programme. Research infrastructures, well, research infrastructures are not the same as water infrastructures, so don't get confused between the two. Priority 2, industrial leadership, we've got enabling and industrial technologies. Access to risk finance is something I'd like to make a comment about, that we've done an awful lot during the course of FP7 with the risk sharing finance facility to not move away from grants. The 80 billion that I referred to earlier will still largely be grant funding that you don't have to reimburse afterwards. But we do feel that in justified cases, particularly in the case of research that's closer to the market, it isn't necessary just to give out a grant. It may be in the interests of all concerned to have more of a revolving type funding, risk finance, etc. Innovation in SMEs, we're trying to do a lot more for SMEs than we've done at the moment, including those, of course, in the water sector. Now, this is where the bulk of the activity in the domain of water will appear under Horizon 2020, the societal challenges. They are health, food security, sustainable agriculture, energy, transport, climate action, resource efficiency and raw materials, which is highlighted there, and then the inclusive, innovative and secure societies. We look at food security, sustainable agriculture, marine and maritime research. I won't read all of this out, but you can see for yourself that we're promoting multidisciplinary approaches to improve the performance of plants, animals, microorganisms, while ensuring efficient resource use, including water, of course. We heard a lot yesterday about the domain of agriculture. So we're delivering products, but also securing important ecological services such as functional and in situ biodiversity, etc., water regulation. So water has an important role to play in research activities that will be funded under that domain. Other points are tools and data for proper assessment of potential trade-offs between various types of resource use, whether land, water and other inputs, and of course bioeconomy products. And this is an important point that again was discussed yesterday on the issues of trade-offs that have to be undertaken between land use, water use, etc. Aquaculture for healthy, safe and competitive products, as well as for environmental services, bioremediation, land and water management, etc. We move on then to energy. You'll find in the text of Horizon 2020 this reference to solutions to efficiently combine with production of solar energy and water desalination. We heard a lot about desalination yesterday. Move on to transport, waterborne transport, integrated planning and management technologies for a suitable framework for inland waterways. Important topic. Climate action is the main one, I suppose. Climate action, resource efficiency and raw materials. You can see we refer here to fighting and adapting to climate change, sustainably managing natural resources, ensuring the sustainable supply of non-energy and non-agricultural raw materials, enabling the transition towards a green economy through eco-innovation, and developing comprehensive and sustained global environmental observation and information systems. We heard about information systems yesterday. Sustainably managing natural resources and ecosystems. I won't go into the details there because I will just be reading out something that I'm not an expert in, so you can see this for yourselves. It's in the documentation of Horizon 2020. Developing comprehensive and sustained global environmental observation and information systems. There are issues highlighted there as well in regard to what we can do to improve the situation. Policy drivers, we hear a lot about policy for climate action. The Europe 2020 strategy itself, the Innovation Union, a resource efficient Europe, moving to a comprehensive low carbon economy in 2050, there's a raw materials initiative, EU sustainable development strategy, maritime policy, eco-innovation action plan, and EU environmental policies in general, water framework, waste framework directive, general water directive, etc. Things that are rather technical. I will move on now and move a little bit away from the order of these presentations and to pick up on something that Sarah said. She mentioned this issue of conditionality, and in fact I'm going to skip very, very quickly to the final slide before coming back. Conditionality is a very, very interesting point, and it's one that, particularly in the domain of cohesion policy, is more and more important. As you know, the Commission over the years, through successive cohesion packages, has given literally billions and billions and billions of euros for the promotion of EU priorities, whether it's in water, etc. So, for example, compliance with the Water Framework Directive and various other water legal provisions. And the Commission, frankly, has said to itself, we've given an awful lot of money to these member states, but none of them ever seem to end up actually complying 100% with the directive. Now, what does conditionality mean? It doesn't mean absolute linking of the two. It doesn't mean we're going to say, I'm not giving you any more money if you don't do this by Tuesday. But what it is, the conditionality means making some link between the provision of European funding under cohesion policy. Now, there's no conditionality in Horizon 2020, but under cohesion policy saying, look, if we're giving you 5 billion euros to develop your water services sector, could you give us a better date for when you will actually comply with provisions X, Y, and Z of the framework directive? And so in the domain of the environment, that will be the conditionality. So you can see the conditionality is linked to the activity. So member states receiving funding for building water desalination plants or whatever will need to have a much better focus than they may have done in the past on complying with the directives that are laid down. So not just taking the check from DG cohesion policy, but noting the letter that was sent last week also from DG Environment. So that's what conditionality means. Conditionality under, well, let's deal with it here before moving back to my slides. Conditionality in the domain of research is quite straightforward. It's the existence of a smart specialisation strategy. Let's see if I can go backwards now and go to where I pick up where I was going to speak. Yes, cohesion policy, 347 billion euros for the current programming period, something similar in terms of the amount for the next programming period. What I'm here to speak to you about today is the thematic objective that's strengthening research, technological development and innovation, but you can see there's a range of other thematic sectors that are not entirely unsimilar to what we find in Horizon 2020. So even at that simplistic level, there are opportunities for thinking of synergies between the two. In terms of research and innovation specifically, the three key priority areas, if you look up the relevant provision of the cohesion regulation, is that there are three parts: enhancing research and innovation infrastructure, promoting everything to do with business, RDI investment, but also open innovation, smart specialisation, public service applications, even social innovation. And then the third broad category is supporting technological and applied research, pilot lines, etc. And what this means, by the way, is that although it's not specifically stated like that, if you are looking for funding under cohesion policy for research, there is very little, except perhaps for, it always sticks in my mind, decommissioning nuclear reactors. There's very little that you can do under a call for proposals of Horizon 2020 that you can't fund at the same time with cohesion policies. That's something to bear in mind. One of the things we find is that there tend to be cohesion communities in the public administration and in academia, and there tend to be research communities, and they don't interact sufficiently. So that's important. Smart specialisation, I'm on to the third part of the presentation. Now, what is it? It comes from an expert group we had a few years ago called Knowledge for Growth, and the idea is that smart specialisation is basically helping regions to help themselves use their resources in the domain of research and innovation. It involves a number of activities. It involves specialisation in English means usually focusing. So it involves a member state making choices, selecting priorities on the basis of international specialisation and integration on international value chains, or not, as the case may be. A member state can undertake a smart specialisation analysis and find that, frankly, what it's doing at the moment is okay. But we tend to believe that most of them, member states and regions, when they undertake a smart specialisation assessment, will find that there is room for improvement. And of course, one of the reasons for that is competitive advantage, mobilise talent by matching RDI and business needs and capacities. So if you're doing 5 or 6 things at the moment, maybe 1 or 2 of them could be done far better or would deserve better resources. But at the same time, just because a particular domain of activity is something very interesting and everyone is talking about it, doesn't mean that a given region should necessarily prioritise that. We can't have a Silicon Valley in every region of the European Union. And another related issue here is the idea of critical mass. It can sometimes be the case, as is revealed through, for example, an ERC grant, that there is one expert or a very, very small team of experts in a given university, in a given region, that are among the leading experts in a particular domain. But it may be highly unlikely that you can use that small core of expertise to build a research strategy for the entire region. So an element of critical mass is there as well. Collaborative leadership, it isn't just top-down, and it certainly is not top-down. There's a need for all actors to be involved in the development of a smart specialisation strategy. There's a phrase that you will come across in smart specialisation called the entrepreneurial search process. And what this basically means is all the actors in the development of smart specialisation strategy sitting down and thinking what can be done, but what can be done by taking account of what entrepreneurs in the broad sense in the region are actually interested in. And this relates back to some of the presentations yesterday. So it isn't just the research departments of the universities drawing up a wish list of what they would like to do. It depends on the degree to which this can be integrated. Relevant size, I've already mentioned that. Connectedness is an interesting concept, that we may have a situation in a given region or member state where there are lots of activities that are being undertaken where somebody could do a study which said there are scope for connecting a lot of these, but they tend to sit in their silos. So connectedness is an important issue to determine the potential for learning about the opportunity and magnitudes. This all comes from Professor Philip McCann, who was one of the founders of Smart Specialisation Strategy. He's a professor in the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. I'll speed up a little bit. Smart specialisation is not necessarily about promoting specialisation unless it is clear that this offers the greatest rewards. It is not about championing sectoral policies. It is about finding the new and emerging technologies, linkages, which offer the greatest medium and long-term local entrepreneurial opportunities. Well, there you are, even highlighted in red. That's what smart specialisation is all about, but as we have a phrase in English, sometimes it is easier said than done, and this is certainly the case in relation to smart specialisation. A smart specialisation approach to regional policy should be about promoting the generation of local ideas and maximising both intra- and inter-regional knowledge spillovers into relevant scale domains, embeddedness and relatedness. This is about really exploiting the opportunities for getting everyone to work together, and as sometimes happens in the domain of commercial activities, where what's called the goodwill of a firm can be worth something more than the actual individual elements of it, the goodwill of a research field in a particular member state can, when exploited, be more than the sum of the individual parts. I won't go on more of this. Smart specialisation in the water domain. I mean, why am I talking about this smart specialisation? I spoke to some people dealing with transport recently, and I did say, and I will say it to you dealing with water, that except perhaps here in Andalusia, and maybe in some other regions that are involved in the Noviwam project, let's be honest, it's unlikely that the water sector specifically is going to be a specific key research priority in most member states and regions' smart specialisation strategies. Let's be clear about that. But think back to the pie chart that I showed you at the beginning of my presentation, where, yeah, the bulk of FP7 funding for research in the domain of water was in the environmental sector of calls for proposals, but it was also spread across other areas. So the water sector can appear in many themes under many guises, and in the same way as it can appear, and as I've shown you, in many areas under Horizon 2020, scope for supporting water and water research can arise in many different areas thanks of the cohesion policy as well. So that the key message is that the water sector must make sure it is known to those who will be drawing up smart specialisation strategies in order to underline its importance. So it's important that those who are involved in research get the message across to those who are involved in cohesion to make sure that water is not forgotten when the smart specialisation strategy is being developed. I've already covered the conditionality. This is just steps to developing a strategy. I won't go into it in details, but I will say that everything you ever wanted to know about smart specialisation, or even a lot more than you wanted to know, can be found on the website of what's called the Smart Specialisation Platform that is located right here in Sevilla, in the IPTS of the Joint Research Centre. So much more information that you would be interested to see on smart specialisation can be found there. I don't have any particular wrap-up comments to make, but I would be very happy to answer any questions that you may have arising from my presentation. Thank you.